Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and welcome back to another episode of Games I Wish Got Fan Translated. And we're at part 7, so as I keep saying, there doesn't seem to be any shortage of some really interestingly weird Japanese games that I think would be really cool if they got a fan translation at some point in the near future. And I'm still having a lot of fun doing it, so I don't think the series is gonna stop anytime soon. And if you've been watching these videos since the beginning, then you pretty much know what to expect here, but yeah, I'm not going to be repeating myself this time because I think we can all understand that, these things do take time, they're not going to happen overnight, so yeah, there you go. So anyways, let's just get right to it. So the first game I want to talk about here is on the PS1, of course, and that's Another Mind. And it's on the PS1, and no, it's not an RPG, it's actually a point-and-click adventure game or a visual novel sort of thing, but it has live actors in it, so kinda like 428 Shibuya Scramble, but obviously this came first. So the one interesting thing that I will say about this game was that the director was Kaizo Kokubo, who was the main programmer for Chrono Trigger, so it's kinda interesting how he went from that game to this. And as for the game's story, it's about this young female character who gets put into a car accident, and after she wakes up being at a hospital, she realizes that there's actually another mind within her head. And as for why there is another mind in her head, well, it's unknown unless you play this game in Japanese as of now, but yeah, this game also has a lot of very interesting scenarios that actually play out with this whole concept, which I do think is pretty interesting. And just like I said with the last part, with some games that were Japan only that had this like live action sort of thing, for some reason I actually kind of like the aesthetic that this game has. I think it actually does look pretty cool. So if you have a soft spot for some of those old school FMV games like on the Sega CD or the 3DO, then I think this is one that might get your attention. And the next one I want to mention is a trilogy of 3 games, being the Arcus series. In fact, this compilation set actually has Arcus 1, 2, and 3 on the Sega CD. And I do think it is pretty awesome that they were able to remake like 3 original PC games onto the Sega CD, all in one package. Of course, I wouldn't mind seeing these other versions get translated on their own though, but I'm pretty sure that the Sega CD version with all 3 in one would be the most convenient one to do. So yes, this is an RPG series from Wolf Team. In fact, I'm pretty sure most people are familiar with the spin-off, which is an action sort of game on the Sega Genesis called Arcus Odyssey. So it has that like old school like dungeon crawling sort of vibe to it, and I really love the graphics in these games. I think they look really nice, very colorful, and of course the music is just really awesome. For that, it's not only composed by very talented composers, but also I actually talked about it fairly recently in my Sharp 68000 soundtrack video. So yeah, I won't say much more about it here, but I will just say that I do think it does look pretty cool. And as for the next one, it's yet again another PS1 game, and this is one that has a kind of a funky title, and that being Yamifuku Natsu Taito Monogatari Fututabi. Yeah, it's a long name, that's for sure. And yeah, Taito Monogatari, it's actually related to that OVA that I reviewed before called Doom Megapolis. But the one interesting thing about this game is that, yeah, it's actually based around like certain stuff with the story of Taito Monogatari, but in reality, it's actually more directly based after the book series that's made by the same guy, being Hiroshi Aramata, and that happens to be Sim Fang Shui. But I guess they had to call it Taito Monogatari instead of that other name because of the fact that it's a more recognizable name, because that book actually sold a shit ton in Japan. And it's actually one of those books that I've actually been wanting to read, but unfortunately there's no way to read it in English, which kinda sucks, so I don't know, maybe if I ever do a video titled Books I Wish Got Fan Translated, I guess that book would be in that video. But anyways, onto the game now. So it's an old school adventure survival horror game with some pre-rendered backgrounds that look really cool, and it's based around the series. Other than the stuff that I mentioned, it's a little hard to find some information on this game, but from what I've seen of it though, I'm actually pretty impressed with it, and I would like to try it out sometime. But you never know, maybe the game might not be that hard to play through without knowing Japanese, since I have beaten a couple of survival horrors without the English translation, so it is possible, but I can't guarantee it for sure. So as for the next game, so this is an interesting one because this game is actually not in Japanese language, it's actually in Korea, and that happens to be Battle Blues for the 3DO. So this is a tactical RPG on the 3DO, which that in itself is pretty rare as it is, but the setting in it is a cyberpunk world with a SWAT team members in it. So you got a lot of different like guns and bombs and all that kind of fun stuff. And now that I think about it, this game kind of reminds me of that one game I reviewed on PC98 called Tuned Heart. But only that this one seems to be more darker and serious and not so lighthearted. But it still has some nice colorful graphics with a cool art style. So for any of those hardcore 3DO fans out there, well, this is one that you might be interested in. And next up, we got a Sega Saturn game with a really awesome box art, and that being Rampo. And no, it has nothing to do with Rambo, although wouldn't that be funny? So this is another game that's kind of similar to Another Mind, but instead, it's a game that's based after the real-life author, Idagawa Rampo, who has wrote tons of books, mostly being on mysteries. So not only does it look like a pretty cool, dark, mysterious game, but I also kind of like the style that they have here, where that it mixes both live action, but also has some like pre-rendered backgrounds that do look pretty cool in this one. I'm actually kind of reminded of another game that I reviewed before, that one with a super long name, like the Idagawa, like Science Mystery Mansion, whatever. Yeah, I don't remember what the fuck it was called, but anyways though, I do think this one actually does look pretty cool, and also I do think it does look a bit more interesting than that one that I reviewed. And for the next one, we're gonna lighten things up quite a bit by talking about Pink Sock Pirates. Yeah, gotta love that name. So this is a PC98 RPG that kinda reminds me of the Koei series Uncharted Waters, where it has both RPG elements, but also has some strategy moments as well. And it also has to do with pirates and being on the water and, you know, managing a bunch of other shit. But yeah, as you can tell with these pictures, there is indeed a lot of pink in this game. And it's a more, like, lighthearted and quirky type of game in this style, which I do think is kinda interesting and could actually be some fun. And apparently this game is not really considered as a hentai game, although it does have some fan service in it, but there's no like nudity or any like weird sex scenes in it, so it's actually pretty safe for work for the most part, but still weird nonetheless though. But probably the weirdest part about this is that this is actually a series of games, being 3 of them, and as the series went on, they actually kind of moved away from the pirate theme and kind of went towards medieval fantasy, but yet the series was still called Pink Sock Pirates, which doesn't really make much sense, but I guess they were just too lazy to change the name to like Pink Sock Warriors or something. So yeah, just like most PC98 games, it's a quirky game with some fan service moments and has some bright colors in it. And that is perfectly okay with me. And next is yet another PS1 game, and that one being is Cat the Ripper. And I gotta say, this box art kinda looks like something that you'd see on like a Sex Pistols album cover. But I do think that the title screen of this game does look pretty fucking cool with the cat with like the huge claws. I don't know, I think that's pretty badass looking. So this is yet another game that is based after a book, but this one is based after a book by Yamaguchi Malaysia. And you play as a detective, and as soon as he wakes up, he finds a corpse right beside him. Man, don't you hate it when that happens? So after investigating, he finds out that the person that is killing these people is someone that calls himself Cat the Ripper. Yeah, instead of Jack the Ripper. How creative. But I do think that the game's setting is pretty cool looking. It looks like old London. And of course, you also have a lot of like punk rocker looking people as well. And yeah, I will admit, the character models in this game don't look the best. But I do think that the background graphics do look charming though. And it does kind of give me some vibes of that Kowloon game that was also on PS1. I can't remember the name of it. It was like Kowloon something. But yeah, this is one that's more weird in an intriguing way for me. And next up is a PS2 game that's based after one of my all-time favorite animes, and that being Gunbuster the video game. Now, there's actually quite a few Gunbuster games, but most of them are visual novels, but this is one that's actually an action game, and for the most part, it would normally be playable without knowing Japanese, but unfortunately there's a little bit of some adventure mode aspects to it that are pretty hard to figure out without knowing what to do, so I actually wanted to review it, but couldn't do it because of that, which is why I'm talking about it here. So from the bit that I've looked up with this game and played of it, it seems like it does follow the OVA series pretty well, where you get to do some space mech battles and shit, which actually do look pretty fun, but unfortunately I wasn't able to experience that because I couldn't figure out how to do the shit within the school section at the beginning. But yeah, there's not a lot I can say about it that I already haven't said before about the anime, so if you are a fan of the anime like I am, then you'll probably want to play this one when it's playable in English. And next up is a PC Engine CD game, and that happens to be Moonlight Lady. So this is a top-down action RPG in a modern setting, and also has some magical girl elements to it, and for that reason, it actually kind of reminds me of the Valis series if it was a top-down action RPG. And it seems like that you can also use other characters in this game too, which does seem like it could be pretty fun. But yeah, this is another game I actually did try to play a little bit of, but unfortunately I couldn't figure out what to do at the beginning, so maybe at some point in the future I might. And finally, as for the final game I'm going to be mentioning in part 7, happens to be July on the Dreamcast. And the most hilarious thing about this game was that apparently it was not even released in the month of July. It was released in November of 1998, so wow, they couldn't even get the month right. But all jokes aside though, I do think this game actually looks pretty fucking cool looking. In fact, the cover art alone looks like something that you would see on a black metal album cover. So as you would expect, the game has a very dark and gritty look to it, which I think looks really awesome, has a really nice art style, and the story does sound kinda interesting. I mean, it sounds basic, but basic in a very interesting way. So you play as two male characters, one of them being a younger one and an older one, and you actually try to solve the mystery of a mysterious bombing that happened many years ago. And if I were to guess, then the bombing probably took place in July. But yeah, this and Desperia though, they definitely do seem like the most coolest looking dark games that were released on the Dreamcast that we never got back in the day. So those are all the ones I wanted to talk about in this episode. So yes, as I always say, what are some games that you wish got fan translated, and which ones here seem like they could be interesting to you, and maybe you might know some other ones that I haven't talked about yet. So with that being said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.